So hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this beautiful sunny August day. Of course, I was just outside and noticed the traffic. The Veterans Bridge is closed off, so there's a little a demonstration. We'll call it a demonstration going on with the president here in town. But we have our own star in our midst today. So I want to thank Allen. He is somebody who is making his second appearance with Vine Faith in Action. This one virtually. The other one he held court for about 100 people in our fifth floor. Boy, was that about a year or so ago?
It was cold, so last winter sometime.
Okay. And when I started up this the Vine Author Series, I knew that Allen was one of the people that I wanted to bring in because he did have such a good showing last time and because I really enjoy his books. So I'm going to step aside and let everyone know we are recording, but there should be nothing to be worried about. This will be available on the Vine virtual Vine page shortly after it's done, probably by this afternoon if we can, if not by tomorrow. So thank you, Allen. I will let you take over and I will step out and let Kathy in here real quickly.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I am Allen Eskens. I'm a published novelist. I'm currently writing my seventh novel.
Right there.
And
hello.
hi. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey. I think a lot of you have already heard it, probably more than once. I know at least one person here has heard it probably a dozen times. But then I want to talk about my latest book, Nothing More Dangerous, which really is at the heart of my journey as a writer. It's the reason I became a writer was that novel. Thank you. And then I want to just kind of open it up for a discussion, question, answer, and that kind of thing. So, and I'm going to do a little reading, like a part of the chapter, just to give you a flavor for the novel. So when I graduated law school, I went to law school really without a desire to be a lawyer, but I just wanted to kind of challenge myself. In my heart, I was a more creative person than what law expression allowed. But I wanted to see if I could do it. I was always a poor student as a kid. And it wasn't until halfway through my college years that I realized that I had the ability to get good grades and do something more than just, the bare minimum. And so I get out of law school and I am feeling the loss of that creative side. I was huge into theater when I was in high school. Theater is what saved my life, my not physical life, but my emotional life and my professional life, because it was theater that made me enjoy going to school. It made me want to go to college. And so I see Kathy has her hand up, but I don't know if she's just trying to.
I'm so sorry we're late, and she has met you, your 80-plus-year-old friend. You are her favorite author.
Okay.
Wait, she can't hear, and I was wondering if we could have videoing permission to tape it, to record it.
I am recording it. I don't think you would be able to. I think that's a function that
Okay.
only works for the host.
But if we could have access to it later where I have headphones and she could hear it.
It will be on the virtual Vine page of the vinevolunteers.com website.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead. Just raise your hand if you have any questions as I'm talking, because I like discussion better than lecturing. So,
Okay.
So I get out of law school and I'm trying to find some way to be creative. And because law school was so much about words and my undergraduate was in journalism, I thought I'd give writing a try. Now, understand, I am not a good reader. I'm someone who I really don't like to read. I hate to say that, but it's true. I think I have undiagnosed ADD because it is a struggle for me to read books. I listen to a lot of books on audio now, but in high school and college, I got proficient at getting to the heart of a story by skimming it. I used to buy all my textbooks used so that I could see somebody else's highlighting and just read the highlights and go from there. So I never was a good reader, but I always had this huge daydreaming imagination and I wanted to try and tell stories. So I wrote this story about a 14-year-old boy And it was a short story, and it was the first thing I'd ever written. And I looked at it and I thought, I kind of liked doing that. That was fun. I enjoyed that. But I want to do it well. I don't want to just, I don't know what's good and what's not good in terms of writing. So I started buying books on writing technique. And the first book that I bought was Joseph Campbell, Hero with a Thousand Faces. Now, if you don't know this book, Joseph Campbell went back through the history of storytelling. And he looked at what was it that was consistent from time immemorial, whether it's biblical stories or oral tradition or Beowulf, all these old stories up through the current. And he kind of broke them down and said, okay, most stories have these elements. And the main element that he talked about was the hero's journey. And that it's not enough just to tell a story of this happened and this happened and this happened. There has to be an arc to the story. And the arc is, you take someone who is a certain way at the beginning of a story. They see the world a certain way, they see themselves a certain way. And over the course of this story, they go through these trials. They go through this crucible that changes them. And by the end of the story, they see themselves, they see the world differently. And so I read about Joseph Campbell, I read this hero's journey, and the story I'd written had no arc to it whatsoever. So I sat down and thought, what would be the arc for this 14-year-old boy? And what I kept coming back to was my own journey, coming to understand my own prejudices. So if you would have met me when I was 14 years old, I was very much like Bodhi in the story, in Nothing More Dangerous. Basically indistinguishable. I believed to my core that I did not have prejudices, that I wasn't racist. At the same time, though, I grew up in a society where that was so ubiquitous and so ingrained that I had no way of knowing that these ideas, these notions I had were so far off base. And I left Missouri to go to college. I started at Iowa and finished in Minnesota. And it took me 10 years to finish undergrad and law school because I had to work my way through. But at the end of that 10 years, I had changed tremendously from who I was when I was in high school in terms of my understanding of different people, different races, different cultures. And I looked back at who I was when I was 14, and I just couldn't believe I held those notions. But at the same time, it was so understandable because that's how everybody around me thought. And so I thought, I want to write a story where this 14-year-old boy goes through that journey, that he starts by, I'm not prejudiced, it's just that, and then he says something prejudiced, something racist. And I wanted to take him from that point to my level of understanding after 10 years of college and law school and exploration of myself, but I wanted to do it in the course of a single summer. And so I put together this story of him coming to understand other people when a Black family moves in across the road from him. He's white. And I wanted to stand as many preconceived notions that I had when I was 14 on their heads. So for example, when I was 14, my belief was that most Blacks were poor. So in the novel, I made Bodhi and his mother, his widowed mother, poor. But I made Thomas and his family wealthy. Not wealthy, but affluent, upper middle class. They were bourgeois, so to speak. When I was a kid, if you had asked me, I'd have said that white people have common names, Bill, George, Tom. Black people have unusual names. And so in the novel, the family that moves in, the Black family, it's Thomas, it's Jenna, it's Charles, where the white people in the novel are Jarvis and Cecil and Milo and have the more unusual names. So I wanted to turn as many of those preconceived notions around, but put Bodhi in that world and have him over the course of that summer come to see just how backwards he sees the world. And so that's the arc. That is the storyline. And then I worked on it for 20 years and I enjoyed working on it. It was my joy. I read so many books on writing technique. So when I say I don't like reading, books on writing technique for some reason fascinate me, and books on history fascinate me. So I like those. But I think when I read a novel, my own imagination takes over the story. It's so hard to stay on a page when I'm reading a novel because I'm thinking, okay, here's where I would go with the story. And I've always been like that. Anyway, back to what I was doing. So I decided that I'm going to have this young boy have this journey and come to see the world around him differently. But at the same time, he doesn't just change in terms of his opinion of other people. He changes in terms of his opinion of himself. At the start of the novel, he flat out says to this young friend of his, Thomas, the black boy who moves in next door, he says, I'm not smart enough to go to college. And again, that's who I was when I was 14. I firmly believe that I was not smart enough to go to college. I was, at best, a C student, and that's only because my theater and course classes were straight A's. Everything else I was getting C's, D's, and a lot of F's. Yeah. And so I was told by my guidance counselor that I wasn't college material, and I believed her. And so Bodhi starts that same journey. He doesn't think he's smart enough. The journey also involves, he wants to run away from home. He's lonely out there on this dead-end gravel road. And what he really wants, he thinks he wants to run away from home. That's his external belief, is I'll be happy if I run away from home. What he really wanted the whole time was he wanted to have a home that he didn't want to run away from. And he comes to understand that over the course of the novel. So there's all these small journeys that he takes as part of this larger journey to understand himself. But other people in the novel also have journeys. Bodhi's mother, she never got over the death of Bodhi's father, who died, I think it's 10 years before the story begins. No, 8 years before the story begins. And she still lives in this cloak of depression from that. And she's quiet and she's introverted. And over the course of the novel, when this new family moves in, she has a new friend, and this new friend starts to draw things out of her that Bodhi didn't know were there. She has a journey. The neighbor down at the end of the road has a journey. He owns a construction company, but he has a dark secret that he's keeping. Not a dark secret. He has a secret that he's keeping that comes out over the course of the novel. But another one of the big journeys is Bodhi's next door neighbor, an older man named Hoke, who is wounded by something that happened to him years earlier, that he's always kept close to his vest, never told Bodhi what really happened. And Nothing More Dangerous is as much a journey for Hoke as it is for Bodhi. Hoke has this thing that happened to him in his past that he gets a chance to try and redeem himself. And so that storyline was as much fun to write, is important to me to write as it was to write Bodhi's. So this whole thing I wrote for 20 years. And as I'm writing, I'm learning about writing, I'm practicing, and I'm rewriting and doing new revisions, new drafts. And after 20 years, it wasn't there. It wasn't done. I didn't know why. So I put it aside, but I learned so much about writing technique that I still wanted to write. And so I wrote another manuscript that became my first published novel, The Life of Barry. And before The Life of Barry was even published, I had started a new storyline for one of the characters from The Life of Barry named Max Rupert. And I proposed to my publisher to do a 3-book arc for Max Rupert's character. And they bought it. So I was on a contract for 4 books before The Life of Barry even hit store shelves. Life of Barry hit store shelves, did remarkably well. It just really, it's the way a debut author wants to hit the ground. And so my publisher wanted me to do a sequel to that. So I wrote a sequel to The Life of Barry called The Shadows We Hide. And then I finally got to go back and rewrite Nothing More Dangerous from beginning to end. I didn't even look at the old manuscript. I just sat down, and I knew the story because I lived with it for 20 years. And I sat down and I outlined it from beginning to end and rewrote it. And when I finished the rewrite, I knew it was ready for publication. I knew that it was the story that I wanted to tell. So it came out last year. It is my favorite novel of all the ones I've written. I'm exceedingly proud of it. And what I'm going to do now is read a little bit of the novel, and then hopefully just have a conversation. So if you, and remember how I said I am not good at reading, bear that in mind. So I'm reading from chapter 9, and in this chapter, Bodhi has just met, excuse me a second. Bodhi has just met Thomas. Thomas is the new neighbor who moved in across the road, a black kid, also 14 years old. And their first meeting did not go well because Bodhi said something that was racist without realizing that that's what he did. And Thomas just gets up and walks away. And so Bodhi, who's this lonely kid living out in the woods, really, really, really wants a friend. And he makes this misstep without even realizing it was a misstep. And so he's trying to figure out what went wrong. But he works for the drywall company at the end of the road. At the end of the day, he's walking home from his, from cleaning up the warehouses and stuff down at the end of the road. The road between Scheneker's and Hoke's place took me up a stretch covered by thick canopy of oak branches, under which I stepped lightly as I listened to the night. When I neared my house, a hint of music floated on the breeze, coming from the Dixon place. Now, the Dixon place is this kind of Victorian house across the road from Bodhi that has been empty for 5 years that this new family has moved into. It's a really beautiful house where Bodhi lives in a small rambler that's falling apart. As I neared my house, a hint of music floated on the breeze coming from the Dixon place. Light, shining through the uncovered windows, opened the old house up like a picture book, and I could see the Elgins moving around inside. Tilly rarely kept more than one light on at a time, and the upstairs had been all but abandoned. She outlived her husband by 10 years, and in those 10 years, her world shrank to the point that she never had to leave the main floor of the house, cordoning off a living area made up of a kitchen, dining room, family room, and a cook's bedroom and bath, which she occupied as her own. The fireplace in the family room remained unlit, its chimney clogged with swallow's nest. The rich maple banister, which curved elegantly in a perfect slide between the first and second floor, collected dust, waiting for the day when a child might once again race down its back. The beds upstairs went untouched, sacred relics stored in a silent tabernacle. The house, built in hope of generations of Dixons would warm its floors, had been reduced to a handful of rooms graced by a single pair of tiny feet in worn gray slippers. One time, just a year or so before she died, I saw Tilly moving through the upstairs, wandering the silent halls, pausing to stare at the vacant spaces her tiny frame dwarfed by the archways and bold woodwork trim. She stared into the rooms as if the images in her mind took form and moved through the house with her, bringing life to the emptiness. I somehow assumed that when she died, the house would die with her. But now the old place sparkled with life and light, and something about that struck me as all wrong. Across the road at my house, a pale blue light flickered through the living room window, where I could find my mother, sitting on our faded brown couch, the rest of the house cloaked in darkness, her sadness kept at bay by the glow of a television. The sadness, my term for it, had come to our house when my father died. As a child, I had no better way to describe why my mother never smiled, why she sometimes shut herself in her room after supper or stared at the blue hum of a television until she fell asleep on the couch, why she never asked me where I was going when I charged out of the house in the morning or where I'd been when I came home late. For my mother, speaking seemed to be a thing that took effort, as if a heavy weight pressed her into efficiency and each word came with a price. The sadness had come suddenly, a misplaced step on a scaffolding plank, and now it clung to her like a cold, wet robe. As a child, I used to say prayers while kneeling next to my bed, my mother at my side. I prayed to God for my father's soul, and I prayed that God would keep us safe and healthy. But then, after Mom left, I would slide out of bed and ask God to make her happy. I watched and I waited and waited some more. Eventually, I quit praying. When I was 10, I found a box of postcards that my mother kept on a shelf in their closet, cards she had gotten from my father when he served a peacetime deployment in Germany. Mom had been his sweetheart since high school, and he wrote such loving things to her, ending each missive with, "Missing my songbird." I thought that to be a lovely sentiment, although for the life of me, I couldn't figure out where the name came from. My mother never sang. Once, I thought about asking her about it, but that would have exposed my crime of snooping through her things. In that same box, I found a bunch of pictures taken of our little family before my father's death. My favorite shots were the three of us having a picnic. We were happy, my mom and dad smiling like little children. I looked to be about 2 years old in those pictures, sitting on my father's broad shoulders, pulling his hair. My mother sparkled with a happiness reserved for someone just starting a marvelous new adventure. Her eyes young and alive with laughter as she pushed me on a swing. I made quite a few secret trips to my mom's closet back then, and I fell in love with the people in those pictures. I wanted so badly to remember that part of my life. I would close my eyes and try and recall any day I might have had with my father. I tried to remember my mother happy like that, but I couldn't. Looking back and forth between my house and the Elgins, I couldn't bring myself to go home, to sit in silence next to my mother and mark the passing of time with a television. I wanted to run out into the woods and be someplace where being alone made sense. So that is a passage that tries to encapsulate the loneliness that Bodhi feels out there in the woods and how desperate he is for something other than that. And that is presented to him as the book goes forward. So what I want to do now is just open this up for discussion and Q&A and go from there.
And please remember, folks, I did mute most of you. So before you ask a question, please check to make sure that the microphone has not got a line through it. Does anybody want to be the first one?
Barbara.
Hi, Alan. You mentioned working on your 7th book, but I only know of 5. Am I missing one? I've read 5.
You must be. There's The Life We Bury.
Yeah.
The sequel, The Shadows We Hide.
Yeah.
Then there's 3 by Max Rupert for the Max Rupert arc, which is the Guise of Another, The Heavens May Fall, The Deep Dark Descending. And then number 6 is Nothing More Dangerous.
Oh, okay. I've got to go check my list. But I thought I'd read all those. I'm thinking of 5.
Kathy has a question.
Kathy, are you unmuted? No, you are. Is it Kathy Crissler?
She is not unmuted.
I'm trying. That's right. I have a hard time. Kathy, in the lower left-hand corner, if you put your cursor on the, oh, there you go.
So Norma, big question is, when are all your books going to be available in large print?
Only The Life We Bury right now is available in large print.
Oh,
I don't know why that is, but it's the publisher's call, not mine. And they actually farm it out to a separate publisher. So yeah, that's the only one right now. I'd love to see them all in large print, but it's
yeah.
my job is to write them.
Yeah. Here's the question. When are they all going to be available in large print?
Mm-hmm. They are all available in audio, which
Audio?
I know the library has some of them in audio. I don't know if the Blue Earth County Library has them all in audio, but they are all available in audio.
They put her to sleep if she listens to them.
Thank you for your honesty, Norma.
Say, Alan, oh, go ahead, Barb.
Tell us about, I just checked your website. Yes, I have read all 6 books. I only counted 5 for some reason. Tell us about your 7th book and when will it come out, and does it use the same characters as your earlier books?
Okay, I'd love to. Book number 7 will be out in September, October, November of 2021. So we're doing the editing process right now where I'm going back and forth with my editor and making revisions. It is the story of Lila Nash. So if you've read The Life We Bury or The Shadows We Hide, Lila is Joe Talbert's girlfriend.
Mhm.
And she has the significant thing that happened to her when she was just out of high school. And so as the books go along, my characters grow. So in The Life We Bury, Lila's, I think, a freshman or sophomore in college, sophomore, I think. In Nothing More Dangerous, she's in sorry about that. The Heavens May Fall, she's in law school. So she goes to law school. In The Shadows We Hide, she is just graduated from law school and she's taking the bar exam. Her story begins after she takes the bar exam and before she gets the results of that exam. So in that 4 or 5 month period of time, and she's working under student practice rules for the Hennepin County Attorney's Office as a prosecutor. And something happens that brings her back to that summer when she was 18 years old. And she goes on a journey to try and deal with what happened to her when she was younger. It was a book that I took very seriously in writing. I had the idea for it, right after I wrote The Life We Bury. But I wanted to be very careful about writing a female protagonist. I have read a lot of female protagonists written by male writers, and I don't know that they often do the character justice. I think a male writing a female character will often make the female more emotional than they would make a male, or they may go the other way and basically write a male character with a female name and female body parts. So I, for the past 2 years, have been listening to almost nothing but female authors writing female protagonists to try and get in that vein of understanding before I attempted to write my own female protagonist.
Do you have a working title yet?
I do not.
Okay. I was going to write it down.
Yeah, I had a title. The publisher's thinking, let's do something else. So we're right now going back and forth with emails with title suggestions. We should have one by mid-September, but I made a mistake when I wrote The Guides of Another. I had a different title as a working title. And I did some interviews and stuff where I talked about The Guides of Another, but I used the working title of In the Path of the Beast. And then when they changed the title, I still had people emailing me saying, I'm trying to find your book In the Path of the Beast. Where is it? And I got to explain that, we changed the title and you've already read it. So, but yeah, so I never come out with working titles anymore just for that reason.
That's fine.
Hey, Alan,
Yes.
since we spoke last, there has been the George Floyd case in Minneapolis, and I'm wondering, I know you're a big fan of To Kill a Mockingbird, which is one of those books that is always taught in schools when the subject is racism. I'm wondering how you would feel if your book became a new To Kill a Mockingbird in the way that it teaches racism in a more modern period, because I could certainly relate to Bodie, because I think we're the same generation, certainly.
And whether you are from the same generation or not, one of the reasons I wrote the book is because when I read To Kill a Mockingbird, it was easy for me to say I'm not prejudiced because I don't think Jim Crow laws should exist. Because the era of To Kill a Mockingbird is the era of Jim Crow, where it was overt, intentional, on-the-face racism. And I thought, well, if I don't believe that blacks and whites should drink out of different water fountains, then I can't be racist. That journey that I took was to come to understand there are so many more subtle things. Like in the book, I have Bodhi say that whites make better baseball pitchers and quarterbacks than blacks because they are inherently smarter. That's the racist notion. But it was something that as a kid, I firmly believed it because most of the quarterbacks were white. I didn't understand the institutional racism that kept black ball players from becoming professionals. And so even though in Missouri, where I grew up, Bob Gibson was one of the greatest pitchers ever to live, black pitcher for the Cardinals, he was considered the exception to the rule. And so in my circle of society, people that I knew, there was this understanding. And I thought, well, I am not Jim Crow person, so therefore I'm not racist. But the whole reason I wrote the book was to try and get to that second level, the latent, the hidden, the unknown racism. There's a line in the book where Hoke says, it's not a matter of if we have prejudice, we do. It's a matter of understanding those instincts and fighting against them. And I believe that to this day, that even though I believe that I'm enlightened in terms of this issue, I still make mistakes. I still have these tendencies to pigeonhole people because of, unnecessary differences. And so I do firmly believe that it's a matter of understanding that we all have this instinct. To be specific, Hoke is talking about how humans have an instinct to determine good and bad. What's going to hurt me? What's going to help me? What can I eat? What should I fear? And that instinctual desire instinctual notion to put things in those good and bad boxes has developed over time. And now we put things in those boxes based on more superficial criteria. But the instinct to categorize and label things is always there. And that's the instinct that Hoke is talking about, that we have this instinct to say this is good and this is bad. And we have to fight against using artificial criteria to make those determinations. So when I was writing this book, I was specifically, I love To Kill a Mockingbird. It is my favorite book I've ever read. But my book was designed to say there's more to it than just what that book can show you. And there are people teaching Nothing More Dangerous. There are teachers who are teaching it right now. And I would love it if it became, a standard for people to read. But there are so many, there's right now, because of George Floyd, there's a big push to promote Black authors. I love that. I think that's wonderful, because one of the ways you reduce your prejudices is to understand other people. The more you can do to live in their shoes, the less you're going to judge them based on things other than who they are at their core, at their character. So there is that push. I think that there's also a push right now for stories of how people can come to understand the racism better from the inside, from like a white person like me saying, I had these notions, I didn't realize I was racist, here's why. So like I said, it's being taught in some schools. I appreciate the reception it's getting, but no, I'd love it if it became as popular as To Kill a Mockingbird.
Thank you.
I appreciate the teacher's guide that you have on your webpage. Thank
You
you.
have the teacher's guide.
I printed it out. I'm going to give the book to my daughter for Christmas, and I'm going to include the teacher's guide with it.
Any feedback you want to give me on the teacher's guide, I'd appreciate it. I wrote the teacher's guide myself last fall. So I had actually a teacher from New Jersey who is teaching the book, who helped me with the teacher's guide, because there's all these core things that I don't really understand that she helped me connect with. But
yeah, I noticed that the Common Core, are those New Jersey Common Core, or are they, I don't know about Common Core issues.
That's National Common Core.
National, okay. I'll tell my daughter's a social studies teacher.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, any feedback any teacher can give me, I would greatly appreciate, because I'm not a teacher. I don't know how the best way to teach these lessons in a class would be. So yeah, the teacher's guide is changeable, and if I can improve it, I'd love to.
okay.
Any other questions out there? Don't forget to unmute yourself if you have a question. Yes. Go ahead, Kathy. Or is that Norma waving?
Kathy?
I think it's Kathy, but she's muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
This isn't a question. I was in the Peace Corps. Maybe you could take a break and join the Peace Corps for 2 years. And and you learn all about, the more you travel, the more you find that we're all the same, basically.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And
It
I
was just
think, go
totally
ahead.
wonderful.
What's that?
It was just awesome. I'd do it in a heartbeat. I was 50-something years old when I did it. I just did it 14 years ago. I'm 71 now.
Really?
Yeah. There's no age limit.
I never thought about that at this age.
Totally
I,
wonderful.
I
can
do
see
think that a large part of my growth in understanding my own notions of prejudice were getting out of Missouri, were leaving my comfort zone. If I'd stayed there, I'd have had the same friends that I always had.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I go to college, and now I'm thrown into communities that I had never met before. I never met anyone who was Jewish until I was in college, and one of my roommates was, and it was fascinating to have conversations. He was a deep thinker, and I enjoyed just having discussions with him. But yeah, you don't know what's out there until you go look for it, until you go open yourself up for it.
Anybody else? If not, while you're thinking about that, I will ask one. Now, Alan, I know you've made yourself very available to us, and I've seen you, like I said, at South Central College. In the realm of being a published author, you evidently place a very great deal of importance on getting out there and marketing yourself. How do you see that relating to other authors who might be a little bit more aloof and not willing to go out and do things like this?
The bottom line is you have to write a really good book. I mean, if you write a really good book, then there's less of your personal marketing involved. At the same time, people love to go to events and have authors sign books and talk. I have been to events where a lot of people become writers because they are introverts. I believe at my core I was an introvert, but I've worked to become an extroverted introvert. I forced myself out of my comfort zone. Again, I went into theater, even though I had stage fright to the point where it would freeze me on stage sometimes. But I think that authors, when you have an introverted author, you can tell that they're very uncomfortable talking in front of people. When they're signing books, they don't look in your eye, they just sign and they hand you the book. And it is doable, but the more you can get out there and meet people, the more people will talk about you, talk about your books. It helps. It does. I won't go as far as to say it's mandatory that you can't be an author without it, but it is very helpful. Yes, Barbara.
At one time, were you writing a screenplay for one of your books? How is that project coming?
I wrote a screenplay for The Life We Bury. It's under consideration right now. Because of COVID-19, I don't think any projects are going to be bought for another year, maybe a year and a half. It's just, the big companies, the big agencies fired tons and tons of people. And so there is a major company looking at the Life We Bury. So my thought is, I really enjoy writing them. I love writing novels. I love writing screenplays. I have right now in my basement one spot where I sit to work on my novel, and another spot where I can go sit on, and I'm trying to do a teleplay of the Max Rupert series to just see if I could do it. And because it's what I do for fun, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I've enjoyed doing it. And I woke up just the other day, like a week and a half ago. I wake up and I have this great idea for a screenplay. It has nothing to do with my novels. It's a comedy, and I write down my ideas in a book, and then I move on. And this idea keeps coming back to me. So I think I may write. I have a friend who's a mystery writer. He's also he did scripts for comedy series. I may ask him to join with me and just do this for fun, see what happens. So I'm just having a blast. It's fun. And again, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, the novels seem to be doing okay.
Okay. If no one else has questions, I'm willing to take turns, but I have lots of questions. The last time I heard you talk, or last time you came to one of our book group discussions, I asked, what are you reading? Other authors, what books do you recommend? And you recommended Delia Owens' The Crawdads, Where the Crawdads Sing. And
Yes.
that's been on the bestseller list for a year. I got it because of that. We discussed it in the group. It's an excellent book. So what are you reading now or listening to? And what do you recommend?
Right now, I'm listening to podcasts, screenwriting podcasts. So I haven't read a novel or listened to a novel for a while now, but the last one I listened to was The Paris Hours by Alex George. And I love the book. I will say that the ending is not for everyone. It's kind of one of those that leaves a lot of ambiguity in the ending, but the writing style I enjoyed. Let's see, before that, I mean, if you haven't read Educated, you have to read that.
I've read it, yeah.
Yeah. The Silent Patient was a really good mystery that I read. Again, that was I think a year ago that I read that one.
So that was The Silent Patient, you said? I heard
The
somebody
Silent
say.
Patient, yes.
Okay, and the first one you mentioned?
Educated.
Oh, before that, something Eyes?
Alex George's
Oh,
book?
the Paris Hours.
Hours, okay, there you go.
Hours. And The Silent what? Who was the author of that second one? I'm writing as fast as I can.
The Silent Patient.
Yeah, and who wrote that?
Michaelides. It's kind of a Greek name, Michaelides or Michaelides.
Okay, well, I'll look it up. Oh, fine, thank you.
It was a big hit. I mean, you type in Silent Patient, you'll find it easily enough.
Sure.
All right, we've got a lot of people there. I'm hoping somebody else will want to ask a question. How often do you have a chance to, an author just sitting here waiting for your questions? Well,
I think.
Judy? Judy?
Yeah.
Leaving?
Yeah, I have a question.
okay,
Go
Judy.
ahead.
I'm a rather voracious reader, and I have to admit I have not read any of your books, Alan. So I'm wondering if you would suggest where to start, because I don't always start with the first book an author wrote.
There are two places you could start. One is my debut novel, The Life for Barry. The other one is my sixth novel, Nothing
Yeah.
More Dangerous. My
Okay.
novels aren't a series, but there's a connection. So, for example, Joe Talbert is the protagonist in The Life for Barry. He's a college student. He's helped by a law professor and a cop. The law professor is Bodie Sandin. Now, Bodie Sandin is that 14-year-old boy from this
Yep.
book in 1976. So this is actually a prequel to The Life for Barry, but that's the connection. So you don't have to read The Life for Barry before you read Nothing More Dangerous, or vice versa. But you'll see that this kid, this 14-year-old boy, grows up to be this law professor. In my next three novels, I take the cop from The Life of Barry. I tell three stories about him that build an arc. And then I go back and write the sequel to The Life of Barry, and then Nothing More Dangerous. So I take different characters, secondary characters from a previous novel, and I write a story about them. So Joe from The Life of Barry, his girlfriend, Lila Nash, is the protagonist for my next novel.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I hope you enjoy them.
Thank you. It sounds like I will.
All right, keep looking. Nobody
Barbara's
else
got
is-
more. You're muted, Barbara.
Are we going to see more of Max Rupert? At the end of Deep Dark Descending, he was kind of, I was wondering if he was going to recover from his isolation. That book was the darkest of your series, I think. You know, Max Rupert's whole the scene where he was cutting the hole in the ice, I don't want to spoil it for anyone else. That was chilling.
And I'm standing in the corner, Barbara, so I'm gonna just go. So the 3-book arc for Max Rupert, at the end of that 3-book arc, he becomes kind of a hermit. He moves into a cabin north of Grand Rapids and sells his house in Minneapolis, quits his job, and just stays. He's in that cabin. So 3 or 4 years later, something's going to happen to draw him back into society.
Okay.
And
Right.
that'll be the next, book 8, my next novel.
Okay. All right. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, I have a lot of people wanting to see him come back. And his partner, when he was in Homicide, when he was a homicide detective, his partner was Nikki Vang, a Hmong woman.
Mhm.
She is heavily featured in Lila's story, which is coming out next year. And
Yeah.
then she, I think, will also be like a co-protagonist in the next Max Rupert novel. I haven't fully outlined it yet, but I'm leaning towards that.
Okay. Well, I look forward to reading them.
So Alan, when you write with the same characters all the time, do you in any way think of them as archetypes? You know, a certain type that is good to have in a story, or is it just an interesting character you've created?
I try and think of them in terms of their professions as archetypes. So as a mystery writer, I'm going to have Joe Talbot, who's a reporter. His girlfriend is a prosecutor. Bodhi Stanton is a defense attorney. Max Rupert is a former cop. Nikki Vang is a current cop. I don't have a medical examiner yet, but I pretty much covered all the mystery bases there. So that was kind of, as I'm thinking about, I want to have as much fodder so that I don't have to try and pigeonhole an idea. So if I have just a single protagonist, I got to live within that protagonist world, where the way I do it, I have 5 protagonists now, and I could expand it to 6, 7, 8, 9 if I want to. But I can just think, what story do I find intriguing? And which of my characters would be best suited to tell that story? So I have an idea for Bodhi. So when I was in practice of law here in Mankato, I did a lot of work at the security hospital. And that work was fascinating. The people you meet at the security hospital, the residents there, are so incredibly varied in terms of how they see the world. I would love to tell a story involving someone like that. So someone who just has a completely different view of the world. And which of my characters would be best suited for that? Well, I think Bodhi, working for the Innocence Project as a law professor, might have the best avenue to tell a story like that. So I think, okay, how can I have Bodhi go and do that? So I'm in a position where I really have a lot of options, and it really is what trips my trigger. What do I find interesting to go write about? And then I just pick a character and run with it.
Ellen,
Yes.
how do you think your life has changed since you've become a best-selling author?
I am happy. I liked practicing law, but I had to get up every morning. I had to go to the office. I had to argue other people's problems for a living. And when you're young and energetic, that is invigorating. The older you get, it's like, okay, just quit breaking the law, please. But writing has always been a passion of mine. I did it ever since I got out of law school, just as a hobby. I did it for 20 years without publishing anything, just because it's what I enjoyed. Now to be able to do this for a living, it's like, you know, having someone who loves golf, being able to golf for a living. It really is my sweet spot. And I'm like I said, I really am kind of an introvert. So I'm okay with staying home all day. I don't need to, go out and go to bars and have a lot of people around me all the time. I'm good with my wife and my dogs, and I have a comfortable home. So I'm just very, very content.
Do you ever have a vacation from writing?
No, even if I took a vacation, writing is always in here. I'm always coming up with ideas. I'm always thinking about characters and stories, and um, my imagination is always going. So for those of you who don't know, Linda is my neighbor. So when you see me walking my dogs, I am almost assuredly working on a plot point. When I go running in the morning, what I do is I work in my basement until I come up with something that I say, I think I can do that better. Then I'll go for a run, and while I'm running, my mind is working through this plot point and trying to do it better and think of new ways of doing it. So I'm always plotting and writing in my head, even if I'm not at my computer. So when I go on vacation, I am looking around thinking, could I write a story about this place?
Do you have dreams about writing too?
Like I said, I had that dream where I woke up and had this great idea for a comedy movie in my head. That happens rarely. Usually my dreams are about me showing up in court, and I have the file, but I haven't read it. And then about halfway through the case, I realize I don't have an attorney's license anymore. And I'm breaking the law by doing this case. And that point happens in every dream. I'm not a licensed attorney. What am I doing here? Sometimes I'm like, oh crap. Other times it's like, I'm going to leave. I just get up and walk out. So I don't know why that dream keeps coming back, but it does. You're all finding out a lot about me.
It's kind of the author's variation of the actor's dream, where they go out on stage and they don't know any of their lines.
And as a former actor, I have had, and I still have those dreams. You know, they'll put me on stage, and like Pippin, I played leading player in Pippin, and all of a sudden they're saying, as I'm going out on stage, they're saying, "Oh no, you're not going to be leading player. You're going to be Pippin this time." And I'm sitting, okay, now I'm trying to remember what Pippin's lines are, and where's the script? And they hand me a script, and I open it, and it's blank pages. It's like, no, I need a script. It's like, I still have those. Oh boy.
Well, luckily you are a guy who can write the script now.
Yes, Barbara.
If you were to teach a class on writing, what would be the primary points that you would want to include? And are you teaching a class on writing?
I am not teaching a class on writing. I have taught like 1-hour classes at different like writing festivals kind of thing. I focus on nuts and bolts, the nuts and bolts of technique, because that is what helps me the most. When I was studying writing, I took a class at the Iowa Summer Writers Festival, and it was a weekend-long class, and from beginning to end, it was like, okay, sit down, take notes, let's go. And it was, okay, dialogue. Here's how you make dialogue more conflicting. You do this, you do this. Now, you want to speed up your pace, you do this. You want to slow down your pace, here's your techniques. And it was just a weekend of like boot camp. And I still go to those notes from that class every now and again, just to review them, to make sure that what I'm doing intrinsically is everything I'm using all the tools I can. So that's the kind of class that I would teach. I'd want to start out with, plotting and the character arc of a plot, and how do you go about inside the second act, making that second act so it doesn't start to drag. How do you use subplots to break in the middle of the second act? And so it'd be all about writing technique and craft, I think. As you can see, I'm rather passionate about that. Because I actually, this guy hired me to analyze his manuscript, and he was an MFA graduate. And so we sat down, I started going through it, and I started asking questions about his understanding of those brick and mortar craft things. And he had a lot of theory. He could talk endlessly about Faulkner versus Hemingway and comparative, but he did not have an understanding of the technique that brings about different emotions. It brings about different pacings and stuff. And when I was in the MFA program, I felt that what I had learned outside of the program on those more, brick and mortar things was stronger than what they were teaching inside the classroom. I always thought that, I did a story for one of my classes that it was nothing but pace. It was a story about 3 seconds of time. And I used every technique of slowing down pace. It's called 3 Seconds Over Jump Rock. It was about a kid in a bicycle race who the story starts at the end of the race. There's this sandstone rock that sticks out of the gravel road. This is from my youth. And the winner of the race got to go over that rock and jump up into the air on the bicycle. And so the story begins with him hitting that rock and going up in the air. And his front wheel comes off of his bicycle. And it's all about from him hitting that rock till the end of the crash is the entire story. But I use the techniques of pacing, going back in time, forward in time, using Latinets, and it was just me practicing pacing. And my teacher didn't understand. So the other students did, but the teacher, she's like, well, I don't get it. Why would you write the story? He's like, I practice? I don't know. So I think that's what I would teach. Nancy's box is lit up, but I can't hear you, Nancy.
And Nancy, if you are unable to be heard, are you using the chat box at all? If you put your cursor over the picture, you'll see some items come up across the bottom, most likely. If you want to click on chat, we could get your question in, and we can read that to Alan. Or Alan could look at it himself.
Yes. And I think, Kathy, did you have a question? You're muted, Kathy.
Are any more of your books being turned into movies?
Not right now, but I am always working on that. Like I said, the Life of Barry is in discussions with a production company, but right now, nobody's going to be buying anything until they can't produce anything until COVID is over with. And because they can't produce anything, even things that were in production are no longer being done. So it'll take a year and a half to 2 years for things to start moving again at the pace they were. But I'm always hopeful.
Interestingly, I do some KEYC TV talk as the local movie reviewer, and I was on last week. They were talking about the opening of movie theaters and what my feelings were about that. And from everything, people that I've been talking to, it may be that their whole world changes so that they, in the past, had been avid moviegoers. Now they may just sit at home and wait for it to come out on video. And I'm wondering what you see as possible changes in book reading or any of the formats that you use to get your ideas and stories out there.
Well, with regard to movies, I think over the past decade, there has been a shift from quality of movies versus quality of television. The quality of television has exponentially exploded. You have so many good limited series out there that most people are saying, if you really want to watch some good drama, good comedy, good whatever, go to Netflix, go to Amazon, go to Disney. And the movie theater was becoming a bit superfluous. It was. Is
Alan frozen up for everybody? We'll just see if he comes back. A lot of times that will just take a couple of seconds. Hopefully we don't lose him, but if we do, he'll probably come right back in. Come on, Alan, come back to us, man. Well,
You can see the resurgence of outdoor movie theaters.
I'm sorry?
See the opening of more outdoor movie theaters?
I was fully expecting that we would have more open during the COVID situation because technology now makes it possible for that to happen. I think Alan is probably going to be coming back in, so I'll keep my eye out for him. But I just think the convenience, and like Alan said, the quality is so great, and people are used to now being able to watch a movie in their pajamas, take a break in the middle to use the restroom or make some popcorn or whatever else, or some movies that are now being made into 3.5 hour dramas. They can watch it over 2 or 3.
Hey,
Yes.
There he's back.
I'm back. I got kicked off. I'm not sure why. I think my internet connection may have gone. But sorry about that. Yeah, so I think that as I'm working on scripts, The Life of Barry, I wrote a screenplay for a movie, and what I think might happen is they may look at it for a limited series, which I don't see how you're going to make a limited series out of it, but that may be, that's what they're looking at it for. There are so many new companies out there that are streaming that there is a need for material. Again, the problem is you can't produce material right now, so you gotta wait till COVID's over. But once COVID is over, I think there's gonna be a boom of limited series, really good ones that are being written while people are sitting at home twiddling their thumbs right now, like I'm doing.
Yeah, well, that's what I see as the flip side, is that people are using this time. You have to be creative through Zoom and through other things, and I think it can be kickstarting people's brains and how they can be creative and find those creative outlets to utilize.
Yeah, I've got a friend who is a Hollywood actor, who we became friends because he was a fan of my work. He's writing a novel right now. So while people are out of work with the normal production stuff, they're looking at writing screenplays and limited series, teleplays, and some books.
To review your message, press 1.
Okay, Kathy, we're not able to hear you. I
We're
don't know if you're.
watching Norma's favorite author, but she couldn't hear it. So it's being recorded, then I'll bring it back down and give her headphones so she can hear it.
Okay. All right, well, we are now at 3:06. Have we got anybody else who'd like to ask a question? Ask now or forever hold your peace, as they say.
Well, I want to thank y'all for spending time with me instead of going to the airport. It was my pleasure to chat with y'all, and I hope you stay safe and spend some time reading this summer and fall.
All right. Thank you, Alan. Everyone, thank you for coming, and have yourself a great rest of the afternoon. It looks like it's another gorgeous day out there.
It is. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Oh, Kathy, do you have a question?
No. How do I access this app?
Oh, question for Mike.
It will be on Vine, virtual Vine. So go to vinevolunteers.com and then click on the link that says virtual Vine.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Because she couldn't hear a thing, and so I have headphones, and she will listen to it later. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Namaste.